I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 34. Today in the show, we're joined by my friend Tyler Ridenour of Antler Geeks, and we're talking public land hunting. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. And as I mentioned earlier, today in the show, Dan and I are being joined by my good friend, Tyler Ridenour. So welcome to the show, Tyler.
How's it going, guys?
Good. It's going pretty well here in Michigan. And Dan, what about you?
It's going good in Iowa. Yeah, I got right off the bat, Tyler. Did you or your buddies ever call you Rhino, like in high school, or did they ever give you a nickname?
They didn't. There was a lot of plays on the last name, but Rhino is one I haven't heard, actually.
Wow. well when we become friends later on in life, I'm going to call you Rhino.
All right, fair enough.
Is that cool?
Sounds good.
All right. All right, continue, Mark. Iowa's great.
Thank you for getting the important stuff out of the way, Dan. So, yeah, I got to say, it's nice to have a fellow Michigan hunter on the line with me. I'm so used to having to talk to Dan, who's spoiled out there in Iowa. So, Tyler, thanks for being my Michigan company today.
Yeah, it's we've got a lot to cover, that's for sure.
Sure do. So, as I mentioned at the top of the show, Tyler, you're a member of the Antler Geeks team. But to kick us off here, before we really dive into anything else, for those that aren't familiar with Antler Geeks, can you give us a quick rundown of what you guys are all about?
Yeah, sure. Tony Hansen and I started Antler Geeks 4 years ago, and we had been filming, for a number of years for another outlet, and we just kind of felt like it was time to do our own thing. We don't have anything against guys that hunt big managed farms and the guys on TV that hunt with outfitters every week, but there was just something missing, in outdoor media, and that's public land, stuff that guys can really relate to, and that's what we've taken and ran with. And it wasn't like we changed what we did, we didn't start hunting differently. We've always hunted public ground. We've always hunted small pieces of private that we happen to get permission on. Out of all the pro staff guys, hardly any of us own any ground or lease any ground. So it's really 100% DIY. That's our focus. We've got daily content on antlergeeks.com. We do a web series on realtree.com. We have a digital publication that's also 100% devoted to DIY whitetails. So that is, in a nutshell, it's DIY whitetail hunting, how everybody else really hunts. So that's the focus of it. It's a lot of fun. It keeps us hopping, and if you follow along, you get to see the ups and the downs that are reality of deer hunting. So.
Yep, that's the truth. There's a lot of ups and downs, aren't there?
Oh, too many sometimes.
Well, that's a perfect segue for what I wanted to talk about next. Now that we've got a good idea of what Antler Geeks is how has your season been going so far, Tyler? I've watched some of the episodes so far, and just knowing you, I know a little bit. But for everyone out there, what have you been doing so far in fall 2014? Put any big deer on the ground yet?
No, I was fortunate enough to kill one buck on public ground in Dan's home state of Iowa. Fortunate enough to draw a non-resident tag there, and shot a buck there on November 9th. And
nice.
Other than that, it's been kind of a slow season for me. I had 2 trips to Kansas, and one at the end of October, and then one in the middle of November. I actually went straight from that hunt in Iowa back to Kansas, and wasn't able to fill a tag there. And honestly, other than those two out-of-state hunts that have been between 3 different trips, it's been one of my slower seasons. I've hardly hunted here at home. Typically, I spend quite a bit of time in Michigan, kind of that non-prime time. Usually, when things are really good, I head out of state.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, Mark, the grass is a little bit greener on the other side.
Right there with you.
But this year, I lost one of my main pieces of ground that I'd hunted the past couple of years here in Michigan, and just lots going on. Remodeling a house and whatnot. So it's kind of been a slow year as far as hunting goes for me. I mean, still got plenty of time in the stand, but it's been mainly just in those out-of-state trips, and that's been about it. And we do have one trip coming up still. We're going to Indiana, Tony and I, to hunt their muzzleloader season, and that'll kind of round out the year for me. So can't complain. It hasn't been a bad year at all. Fortunate enough to hunt some really big deer in Kansas. Just didn't get one on the ground, and Iowa was great as always. So
yeah, it's hard to beat that, isn't it?
Yep.
Now I think Tony got a buck out there in Kansas, right?
He did. Tony shot a buck. He was out there in November when I was on my second trip there. He shot a buck, and Adam Millard shot a buck the same day that I shot mine in Iowa. And Tony's son Noah actually shot his first buck ever with a bow at that here in Michigan the same day. And Josh Honeycutt, one of our other pro staff guys down in Kentucky, shot a buck the same day. So November 9th was a very good day for the Antler Geeks crew. So.
I'd say so. I couldn't. You can't argue with that. We had a couple of my friends shot between me and 2 other friends. We shot deer 3 days in a row, from the 6th, 7th, and 8th, but haven't pulled off the 4 in one day yet. So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll do it again, but it was it was fun. That was for sure. So.
Yeah, I bet. So when are you heading to Indiana?
We'll be there the middle of the month, somewhere 16th, 17th, I believe. We're going to head down, and that'll be a new experience for us. Tony and I. Neither one of us has hunted Indiana in the past, and we'll be hunting a piece of ground that, we really haven't spent any time on. Tony's never been there, and I shed hunted it for one day in the spring with Ryan Rietzman, one of our other guys from here in Michigan, and so that's really the only knowledge I have of the place is in the little bit I got to look at that day while shed hunting, and we may go down for a quick one-day trip to scout before the hunt, but that's the situation we find ourselves in a lot of times. When we go to new states or we go to new places, or we just get, I guess, impatient or looking for the next best thing. I guess would be a good way to put it. Trying new spots out. A lot of times we show up in places that we've never hunted before, places, states we've never hunted even, and we'll hunt for a week or 10 days and. Sometimes it goes good, and sometimes it's strictly a learning experience. But so
yeah. Now, as you're talking about, how you show up at these random places out of state sometimes and hunt for 10 days or whatever and try to figure out, it reminds me of a story you told me a few years back. So I don't remember the exact details, but correct me if I'm wrong and elaborate if you can. But is it true or not that you lived in a tent on public land in Iowa for like a month or something, hunting out of this little tent in the middle of nowhere?
I did. I was still in college then, and I took, so that was about 7 years ago. I took a semester off of school and actually went to Alaska and did a hunt with my dad and my grandpa up there, which was awesome. And since I had the whole rest of the semester off, I decided I would deer hunt every day. And I had an Iowa tag that year, so yeah, I stayed in a tent for a month in Iowa, and I'd go into town, every couple of days and get a shower at the local truck stop, and I became known as the man who lives in the tent. So all the locals thought I was a little bit weird, but it's paid off. That I know that piece of public ground probably better than any piece of ground other than the chunk that my parents owned that I grew up on. But so it was fun. One of those things you can probably only do while you're a college student, and
yeah.
I enjoyed it. So.
Oh man, that does sound awesome. He's living the dream, isn't he, Dan?
Yep, sounds like it. Well, a college student, or you got a divorce.
I guess he had the better end of the deal on that one.
Right.
While we're on the topic, not of divorce, but Dan, have you gotten a chance to get out hunting anymore?
Nope. No, I have not. I have not had one chance. Like I said, when it comes to my vacation, I throw all of my eggs into one basket over that 2-week vacation time, and then kind of put the family on the back burner for a little bit. And when that's over, it's pretty much over. This past weekend, just a little bit of an update, I got 2 bits of information. I got some good news and I got some great news.
Okay.
The good news is that I think, as you may know, my wife is expecting, and we found out it's going to be a boy.
Yes, congratulations.
So that's the good news. Now the great news is that she is going to allow me to go back and hunt 2 weekends in a row late season.
Ooh.
So that almost tops the hey, your son's healthy, everything's just fine. I'm like, all right, I got 2 more weekends to try to get it done.
Oh,
so
man, that is really good news.
Yeah. So who knows what'll happen the shotgun hunters are going to come through and just crush everything. And typically the property that I hunt goes to sleep after that. And once that's, I don't know. It's hit or miss.
Yeah. Well, I was actually thinking about this for some reason about your late season hunting opportunities, and I got to thinking, on some of the properties that you hunt, we did find a good number of sheds, and indicating that there was a good amount of deer still hanging out there in the winter time period. So, right. I don't know. I mean, there's a chance, right?
Right. I'm still determined to get that shed back from you.
that's Tyler. The story on that is that I found a really nice big 65-inch shed on one of Dan's properties this past spring. But Dan's rule is that if he kills the buck, he gets that shed back. So
yeah. He's got some major incentive for you to hand that over.
Exactly.
Right. I just gotta find him.
Well, I hope you do. As much as I want to keep that shed, I do hope that you find the buck that you've named Mark Kenyon, because he's a son of a gun.
He's a sidewinder.
That goes for both of us, I guess. Well, I guess now that we've kind of ran all over the place with this, Tyler, as I mentioned earlier, what I was really hoping to do was pick your brain about what you just talked about doing, which is hunting public land. And you do it just as much as just about anyone I know. So I figured you'd be a great guy to talk to about this. And there's so many people out there that can relate to this, because this is their only hunting opportunities, is hunting the public land that everybody else can hunt. And it's a huge challenge, but it also can be, tremendously rewarding to kill a deer off of some of these tough to hunt places. And you've done it time and time again. So I've got a lot of different questions that me and Dan wanted to run by you and really get your insight on it, and maybe hear some of your different stories of the successes you've had across Kansas, Iowa, or wherever. But maybe to kick things started, maybe just starting at the very beginning. When you're starting this process of saying, okay, I'm going to hunt in a certain state and I'm going to hunt public land, how do you go about finding public land and determining if it's, high quality enough and a piece that has enough potential that you would want to hunt it? How do you start that?
Most of what we do, a lot of times the only scouting we do before we show up, it's all on the computer. There's so many assets now, and with all this, all the state, game divisions, they all have the public lands listed on their government website for the most part. So you can get an idea right there of kind of where they're located, the acreage. I guess the biggest things we look for when you're just looking for a piece of ground initially is, we try to stay at least an hour away from any, major city center. It's just a lot of times you end up, in a little dinky town in a sleazy hotel somewhere, but you get away from the town and, there's a lot less people there. So that's the big thing, I guess, initially. And then just picking them apart, looking for the same types of things that you would look for on, really any piece of ground. Pinch points that are leading in and out of the public stuff that's on the borders, and looking outside of the public land too is a big piece of it. You can't just look at that one chunk. It may be a chunk of timber that's 2,000 acres, and there may not be a single stitch of crop on it, but if you can find where there's crops right on the border in certain places, especially early season, late season, it gives you an idea where you can at least get close to those deer that are on feeding patterns. As far as states go and regions of the state and stuff like that, there's always those famed counties, I guess in really every big buck state, and I try to avoid them. If coming from Michigan, all of Kansas is better than home.
Right.
All of Iowa, for the most part, is better than home. Sure, there's certain little pockets and little regions of those states that are, the absolute, best of the best. They kill the most booners. They kill the most, there's the most 200-inch deer have come out of that county, whatever. I'm happy with shooting 140 or 150-inch deer off public ground. And a lot of times that next county over that nobody ever says anything about is just as good, really.
Right.
So don't take some of that stuff to heart too much, and don't be afraid to venture out away from those well-known areas a little bit.
So after you've looked on the maps, you found out what area you want to hit. Are you going there preseason, or are you just showing up at the hunting season and jumping right into the timber?
It all depends. I guess sometimes if we're close enough and we can, it's reasonable to drive there in the preseason, we can. Where we go in Kansas is, it's 18 hours away, so it's tough to make that kind of a drive, in the summer, just the amount of time that it takes you to get out there and get back. There's usually just too much going on, with life to be able to carve out that kind of a time frame to get out there and scout. We went to North Dakota a few years ago and never set foot on anything until we got there. It was just all, on the computer beforehand, because that was a 20-some-hour drive. Closer play, Indiana. Like I said, I went down there last winter, shed hunting just for a day at least to get a little bit of an idea of what it was like, because it's a close enough drive. And Ohio, we've spent a fair number of days back and forth from there, scouting different places. So it just all depends, I guess, on location. So.
Can you elaborate, Tyler, for us on exactly in these instances where you do actually go in person to scout, whether that be, in the spring or summer, or maybe you show up at the property in the fall and you want to do some scouting before actually hunting? Can you walk us through what that scouting looks like? What are the things you were looking for? What are you trying to identify? What are you trying to learn?
Well, I mean, aside from, what you'd look for really on any piece of ground, the big things we look for is, where the parking areas are. A lot of these public land areas have maybe, mountain biking trails or equestrian trails or some other, type of trail system where hunters can use those to access, and get farther back in a lot easier. And you can do it from home a lot of times, even if you can get a hold of, the the little office is a lot of times at the piece of public ground or the state forest, whatever it is. They'll have little brochures and stuff a lot of times at the facility that have those trails on them. And they're hard to find online, but if you call them up, they'll send you one of those brochures so you can study it in the off season. And I'll actually go through, make a map on Google Earth once I've, committed to a property, and I'll put all those trails in, and I'll put all those parking areas in, and then you kind of, make a radius of where other people are going to go, and then you find those little pockets that are, that are too far away, or maybe there's some type of terrain feature, a river or, some really, really steep stuff that most guys aren't going to go, past, and find those little pockets that are a lot of times not hunted at all. If you find a big enough piece of public ground, or even just the right one that's got those kind of land barriers, you can essentially have private ground, stuff that's hardly ever hunted because nobody wants to go that far. So,
are you using trail cameras on public land?
We do. It's, I guess it depends where it's at. There's certain spots where maybe they're too far for us to even want to go get them, like on a scouting trip. And then sometimes they're a little bit too close to a trail or something like that. And you kind of gamble with them getting stolen. And I've probably had as many stolen as more than I own right now. But it's just part of the game. We definitely don't buy expensive trail cameras. It's always been kind of a joke between me and Tony to try and find the best $100 trail camera on the market because we don't really want to spend much more than that on them because they seem to disappear pretty quickly. So,
hey, I got a real quick question while we're on the topic. I've never really hunted public land a lot, so I guess I've never run into an issue like this. How do you, not necessarily communicate, or how do you deal with other hunters hunting the same areas that you hunt? Whether it's, they're interrupting your hunt. I know you're always going to, I bet you run into some real dandies out there, but how do you deal with a situation like that?
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
You just hope that the guy is level-headed, to a point, and if it's later in the year, if it's been a tough season, sometimes I've got to remind myself to, try to keep my cool. But it's, just trying to just lay out where he is, where he's hunting, or, where they're looking to hunt, whatever it may be. I'm just trying to give each other some respect. A lot of times I'll give in, honestly. I look for those spots where nobody else will go, and a lot of times if somebody else shows up, if I have a stand up, I'll go pull it. I get out of there and I'll go find another spot. That's the beautiful thing about hunting public land. You got a lot of options, so you can always drive to another place and start the whole game over again. So it's tough to deal with sometimes, especially if you've got a spot that is really good, and maybe some guy just kind of wanders upon it and didn't do all the homework. He just happened to wander that direction that morning with his climber or whatever it may be. It can be extremely frustrating, but it's just part of the game, and you learn to deal with it. And one of those things, if it does happen and you end up shooting a buck on that trip, it's that much more rewarding because it was another yet another obstacle you had to deal with and overcome. So.
Yeah, so Tyler, I just watched the most recent episode of Antler Geeks, in which you were hunting this public land in Iowa, and a situation kind of similar to what we're talking about arose here. You showed up at this property, and there was a whole bunch of hunting pressure where you weren't expecting it. Can you walk us through maybe that example of how, what happened and how you adjusted? Because I think that'll be helpful for people to see, an example of how you can adjust for that hunting pressure on public land and still have success.
Yeah, absolutely. That piece of ground I'd hunted in the past, and we've got, one of those little spots that we look for where nobody will really go. It's too far from the parking areas. It's too far from the roads, for most people to walk into. And there's a river on the other side of it, and that river's always been really high. So I went this year with waders and 200 feet of rope and rafts and whatever we needed. I had it to make sure that we could get across that river, because it's actually a very easy access point if you're willing to cross the river. We got there and it was mid-calf high, and there was other guys crossing it in rubber boots, and I'd already had a set hung there. We went out early in the season and and got our stand hung, and I mean, that was the spot. I was pretty much all in. That was the tree. I'd been looking forward to going back to that exact tree, since last time I drew an Iowa tag. And we showed up, and there was just, it was lined with trucks, and there was all kinds of guys in there. I actually went in to adjust the set. We had another guy walking down. They're walking down the deer trails, and it's just, you feel like pounding your head against the tree, but what can you do? So we backed out and started kind of looking at the deer sign. There was standing corn on the neighboring property, and the deer were using that a lot coming to and from. And the deer trails had all kind of diminished the deer sign right there where all those guys were coming in. So I slid down the river and pretty much found where the deer had adjusted to the hunting pressure. Those deer had really never been hunted like that since I've been going there. I've been hunting that place for 7 years ago was the first time I'd hunted it, and so they adjusted, and I had to adjust with them and slid down the river and kind of did some spur of the moment scouting, and we got a stand up, and our first full morning in there, I killed him. So,
jeez.
So it's just I guess not getting overly frustrated where you completely pull out. I knew it was a good spot, and there's always a lot of good deer in there. Just take a step back and kind of figure out what the deer have done. They had obviously responded to the pressure, and we just had to figure them out. So I guess in that instance, we did use an observation stand for our actual first set up, and kind of looked into where I thought most of the deer had kind of moved their river crossing to, and we saw a lot of deer a ways off that morning, and then we went in and hung the set from there, and it ended well. So
yeah. So is that observation stand tactic something you employ often on these public land spots when you're still trying to learn a new area, or is that something that just in this case seemed like a good idea?
It's something at least that I use a lot, and I actually use them as much to see where other hunters are accessing as much as I do to see where how the deer are using the ground. A lot of times you'll see 4 or 5 trucks at a parking area, and there's maybe one trail that leads off from it, and I'll set up where I can see a lot and see where those guys are going, maybe to give me an idea where the hunting pressure is, and then I'll use that, to adjust. So it's, that's another big piece of it, I guess, is figuring out where the hunting pressure is and scouting other hunters as much as, you scout the actual deer. So.
Yeah, definitely. Now, stay on the topic of stands. You mentioned in this year in Iowa, you had gone and set a stand and left that there until you came back later. Are you, depending on where you're going and, where you can, where you can't, are you typically trying to go into these public spots and hang stands early on, or at least prep trees beforehand? Or are you typically going in with just some portable stands or climbers and just, going in there and running and gunning as the trip progresses?
Yeah, more or less, we hang it when we get there. That was just kind of a rare instance, honestly. I happen to know that, that piece of ground well enough in Iowa, and then I'd hunted that area enough that I knew the tree that I wanted to be in. So we went in, we went out there this summer and did a little scouting and got that hung. Right, it was actually the first weekend you could legally hang stands out there. Went out and got it done. So it really gave me something to look forward to, at least, but never actually sat in the tree. So
yeah, I imagine that was pretty frustrating.
It was, but like I said, it's just you gotta learn to shake it off. And I think that's a lot of people have a hard time with that. Guys that do hunt public land, they you get frustrated, and it is frustrating. There's no two ways around it. It's hunting public ground is it's a frustrating deal. But you just learn to deal with it, I guess, and the more you do it, the thicker your skin gets. So
yeah.
So are you bouncing around a lot when you're on these trips, or and what kind of tree stands are you using that allow you to move freely?
I guess as far as bouncing around, usually it's like a first trip somewhere. If it's a piece of ground we've never hunted before, I'll cover a lot of ground. I don't get too hung up on one stand location. I try to cover as much of the area, that I think is worth hunting, as I can, to get an idea, what it's like, how the deer use it. Maybe I was off on, what wind's right, and so a lot of times those first trips are unsuccessful. But you learn so much from them that it's all valuable. So yeah, the first trips, most of the time we do cover a lot of ground, and then return trips, you kind of hone in on the better locations. And as far as tree stands go, individual sections of climbing sticks, the little 3-foot sections, and hang-on stands are pretty much all of us use. Climbers are a little cumbersome with camera gear, and ladder stands are too big to carry a lot of the places that we go. So
yeah. Have you ever had your stand stolen?
I have, yep, more than once, but it's not fun.
No.
And I try to use the cheapest stands we can. It'd be nice to have a bunch of really, really nice stands and be super comfortable the whole time, but they're just same as the trail cameras. It's bound to happen if you do it enough. So I could say, I guess tree stands seem to not to get us stolen as often as trail cameras. Trail cameras seem to walk away an awful lot. But it does happen with tree stands too.
Yeah, I don't know if I've told the story before, stop me. But speaking of just trail cameras getting stolen, I had hung a trail camera. This actually wasn't on public land. This was on private land. But what I had done is I had carved my name and phone number into the back of the trail camera and hung that trail camera, and I don't know, a week or two later I went back to check for it, and it was gone. I assumed at that point, I didn't have any idea of who might be trespassing in the area or what might have been going on. I think I talked to the landowner about it, and he didn't know anything or hadn't seen anyone, so I kind of figured that camera was gone. Well, fast forward like 2 months or 3 months, I get a phone call from Cabela's, and they asked me, is your name Mark Kenyon? I'm like, well, yeah, it is. And they said, well, we have your trail camera. Unbelievably, whoever stole my camera brought it into Cabela's and returned it, got money for it, and Cabela's never realized that it was used and had my name and stuff on the back of it until, like a week later, and they were like repackaging it, I guess, and then they saw that. So how crazy is that? I got my camera back, and it was nuts.
That is a wild story. So.
I had a situation where I went back and I had 3 trail cameras on one 40-acre piece stolen. Ugh. And I was furious. I called the sheriff. I called the newspaper. I'm not joking. I went on to every Facebook page in that area. I said, I'm missing, stolen trail camera. The sheriff came out. He walked the areas with me. I pointed out where they were. I went to every house on that road and up and down, in that area, asking, hey, has anybody been on this? And got to the right people. Well, I came back 2 weeks later with another trail camera and a cable this time that I was going to put on, and all 3 trail cameras were back at the bottom of the tree. So either they found out, hey, I know this guy, I don't want to steal his stuff, or, hey man, this guy's looking for us, and there's a chance we get busted. I better put all this stuff back so it stops.
Yeah, wow.
So luckily I got it back. I did get a picture of the guy's ball cap in the top of his truck. So, because he was looking at the trail camera when he opened it up, but I didn't see his face. So it hasn't happened since, knock on wood.
Wow. Well, that shows you the power of actually enforcing, your, whether it be your property borders or in this case, your physical property, showing people that you're actually going to do something about it will sometimes pay off. So it's a good story.
Right.
It's a parable of sorts, Dan. Thank you.
Right. You're welcome.
So this is kind of just popped in my head, and I've kind of talked about this to some people. Tyler, would you say that you get more satisfaction or excitement or enjoyment out of killing one of these public land deer? Let's say you kill a 125-inch buck on public land in Iowa, and then you kill a 145-inch buck on private land somewhere in Iowa or Kansas or something. Would you value that public land buck or enjoy that experience more because it was on public?
It's, for the most part, yes. I mean, there's something special about it, and it's not, it's not that the deer's any harder to kill, once you're in the tree and you've done the homework, because he's, for the most part, the places we hunt, he's in a pocket that's not going to get the hunting pressure like, a lot of the more easily accessible public ground is. But yeah, I mean, they are more rewarding just because the amount of effort and work that goes into it. It does make it a little bit more special. So.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I can imagine that. I gotta think about this. I've killed a buck on the border of public land. So it came off of public land, and I shot it like 2 feet over the border on a private. So I might say I sort of killed a buck on public land, but I don't know if I've fully experienced, heavily pressured public. I've hunted plenty of it, but I haven't had that much success on it yet. So that I can imagine how you would, how that would mean something more in a different kind of way because of that challenge. So that's awesome. Now, when you mentioned the fact that you are looking for these areas where you can get away from the pressure, right? And I think that's, one of the go-to kind of basic frameworks for having success on public land is get away from the pressure. And you mentioned an example of, finding a river or something that might block other people from getting to a section. Are there any other examples, or can you elaborate on some more potential hot spots like that someone might be able to look for? Is there anything else that someone can kind of clue into when they're looking at maps or when they're looking at property that might be the type of place that could keep out other hunting pressure, or could be one of these little secret honey holes?
I mean, more than anything, distance. For the most part, people are lazy. They don't want to walk that far, especially carrying a tree stand. So it's that extra, half mile, that extra 3/4 of a mile. And I mean, some places I've gone as far as printing a map out and measuring out, how far 3/4 of a mile is, and using a compass, and actually making a circle around each public or each parking area, every access point, so you can see that's where people are willing to walk to, and then you have the other areas, and that's where you start to focus. And like I said, just getting away from them. All those different things you can use that you need to look at. The trail systems, the parking areas, anything like that. It's all super valuable stuff. Another tactic we've used, a few times in the past is lakes, and and even big rivers. Actually, putting a boat in to access some of these places, and it's a lot of extra work. Hauling a boat, loading it up, maybe going for an hour boat ride, and then hiking in from there. But it's something people don't think about. And there was one day, me and Tony were in Ohio 2 or 3 years ago, launching a boat at 4 a.m, and there were some guys getting ready to go duck hunting there, and they, the look on their face was just priceless. 2 guys with tree stands and camo and bows getting in a boat, and they just couldn't fathom what we could possibly have been doing. And we went in. It was about a 45-minute boat ride, and access to through a reservoir, and we essentially had private land to hunt. A lot of those places that are reservoirs, they may be federally owned, state owned, whatever they are. There's a lot of it that is physically inaccessible. You can't walk to it. There's places that are totally landlocked by private, and the only way to get to them from the public is on the water. So that's another thing people can look at if you have places like that where you live or where you hunt. It's honestly the best way to really guarantee you're going to be left alone. The only other guy that may hunt it is people that have access to that private ground that borders it. Obviously they can come onto the public. But from a public hunting standpoint, that boat's going to be the only access. So it's a really good tactic, and whenever we can, we use it. And those places are a lot of times overlooked too. They may be, when you look at those, the pages from the state that outline what the public land area is good for. It may be a 4,000 acre piece, and 3/4 of it may be water, and they'll put on there it's ideal for bass fishing and for duck hunting, and doesn't say anything about deer hunting on it, because there's nowhere you can really walk to deer hunt. So they often get overlooked and really don't get deer hunted at all. They're kind of rare, but when you find one, they're definitely worth looking at. So
yeah, that's an awesome point. It's something I've looked for a lot too in some of the different places where I've tried out public or been scouting out public. Is anytime I can find one of those spots that you can access by the water, like you said, just seems like an absolute money way to get into those hard to reach places.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
From a strategy or tactic standpoint, do you address public different than private or vice versa?
As far as hunting in the tree, it's all, once you're in, and it's all kind of the same, all kind of the same deal. It's just all the scouting is what's so much different. It's all just getting away from the other hunters. And there's times when, maybe you'll be a little bit more leery, on the calls or something, because those deer maybe hurt them a little bit more. Same thing with using scent and decoys and stuff like that. For the most part, once you're in and you feel like you're in one of those little pockets, I'm going to hunt it just the same as you would anywhere.
So you would still, while you might tone it back a little bit, you'd still call, rattle, try decoy, things like that?
Right, and I do too. I do that a lot anyway. I'm probably a little bit more, I guess you could say, aggressive than maybe the average guy. I like using decoys. I like calling. I like using scents. So I probably still do it more than the average guy that's hunting public ground. And that buck I shot this year in Iowa, had scent out and had the decoys out, and that's what got him killed. So he was actually paralleling us down, following the edge of the river, and he saw those decoys, and on a string he came. So,
can you tell us a little bit about that decoy setup too? Because that was kind of unique.
Yeah, it was. It was not a standard setup by any means. Where the base of the tree was, where the set was at, we were actually in a washout, and about 5-8 yards from the base of the tree, there was a steep little incline that went up maybe 15 feet, kind of on the flat. It went across for 400 or 500 yards, just real flat, grassy stuff. And I had the decoys down in the, what a traditional, I guess, decoy setup would be with the wind and whatnot, down in that washout. The deer could see him from the river, but they couldn't see him from the other side of me where all this open grass and brush was at. And that's honestly where we'd see most of the deer, was out in that brush and tall grass. And the day before when we were in there, the deer just couldn't see those decoys down in that washout. So I actually put a buck decoy and a doe decoy 5 yards from the base of the tree in the wrong direction for the wind, right on the lip of that where it got higher, just so those deer out in that grassy stuff could see them. It was a bit of a gamble, and that buck came in from the river and saw him, and he came right to us, so it worked. But it definitely was a little bit of a gamble. But it was tough finding trees down in there. So we knew that's where we needed to be, but it definitely wasn't an ideal place to use a decoy. But November 9th, I like using them. So
yeah, it was pretty cool in the video. You could see that buck cruising, and then as soon as he saw those decoys, you could see him just lock on. His demeanor changed, came right in there. So that was pretty neat to see that reaction. Another thing related to that decoy, Tyler, is I've been using decoys a little more the past 2 years than before, and I think anyone that's used a traditional decoy can relate to just the how cumbersome they can be and loud and bulky. Walking in with one of these big plastic hollow decoys that makes a whole bunch of noise, and gosh, I've just about shot my thing up with a shotgun because I've been so frustrated with how loud and all that stuff. Now for you, hunting these public land spots that are hard to get to, using that kind of decoy seems, tough to do, and you're not using that kind of decoy. I think you're using one of the silhouette type decoys. Can you tell us about that kind of decoy and how you've seen that work, and if that's something that maybe other people might want to look into for public land or like long hikes and stuff?
We use the 2-dimensional decoys from Montana Decoy, and they are they're, for what we do, they're the only decoy that's going to work. I've tried to use full-size traditional decoys in the past, and it's just not, it's really not possible a lot of times. And when you do take them along, it's such a chore, between tree stands and camera gear and whatnot. Trying to haul decoys along with it, you almost need another person to to come along with you just to help you carry everything.
Uh-huh.
So they just they won't work a lot of times, and you can kick yourself. I have in the past before we started using the the 2-dimensional decoys, where you wish you had one, but you didn't have room to carry it, or it was just a little bit too big and too bulky, and you make the lazy decision to leave it at the truck. Where the 2-dimensional decoys, you can fold them right up, and stick them in your pack, and they don't take up any space. They don't weigh anything. So they're great from that that aspect. I know people get worried with them. There's that blind spot when the deer is right in line with them where they can't see them. A lot of times really almost all the time I'll use 2 decoys. I use a buck and a doe, or if it's just maybe a mature buck and then a younger buck off to the side. And I offset them on different angles. So really, no matter where a deer may approach from, he's gonna be able to lock onto one of those decoys. So.
Okay, that's good to know. That's definitely something I think I want to try, because I'm just getting frustrated. Some of these places that I try to access, you just can't, like you said, you can't get in there with a traditional decoy. So those 2-dimensionals offer some really interesting options for that kind of hunt.
For sure.
So we're getting here pretty close on time, Tyler, but I'm wondering if you can mine the archives of your past hunts and maybe share with us one public land hunting story that maybe was an experience that really helped you learn an important lesson about public land hunting, or was your most memorable public land hunt. Is there anything that comes to mind along those lines?
Oh, there's a million stories I could tell, that's for sure. It seems like there's always something interesting that happens, be it the hunt on public ground itself, or just the out-of-state trip. There's always so many funny stories to go along with them. I don't know, I guess as far as the most memorable, probably the first year that Adam Millard and I went to Kansas would have been 4 years ago, I believe. We killed bucks out of the same tree stand 2 nights apart, and that was a pretty cool one. So it was Adam's first ever out-of-state hunt. His first ever time in Kansas. I'd been there the year prior. That was pretty neat. It was pretty special. So
I bet. And if you were able to put that Yahoo on a big buck, I'd say you were doing something right.
Yeah, anybody that knows Adam Millard knows he is one of a kind. He's a good dude to hunt with, for sure.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome. So really quick, what was that setup? Where did you guys find that worked for you guys out there?
That was an early season hunt. That was September. It was there. Kansas has an early muzzleloader season. Opens the same time their archery season opens, and Adam had a muzzleloader tag and I had a bow tag. And out there in Kansas where we go, it's wide open. The only place there's trees is in the creek bottoms, and the key to the whole thing is just finding food out there. It's pretty sparse, but when you find it, you'll normally find the deer. And then you got to find a place that's got food and a place that somebody else isn't hunting. But yeah, it was just a classic kind of early season setup. Alfalfa field and right on the creek bottom, and Adam shot his buck with the muzzleloader, and then 2 nights later I shot a real nice 10-point. So come right up out of the creek. So it was that was a fun one for sure. So
yeah, that sounds like it. It was made for some cool video too. I saw some of that. So that's awesome. Dan, before we close things up, is there anything else you want to grill Tyler about, or should we wrap this show up?
No, man. Unless he wants to tell me exactly where he's hunting in Iowa.
I can't do that. I've worked too hard on that place, so I try to keep her quiet.
Yeah, I can understand that.
So you said you got one more hunt in Indiana. You're going to be trying to get it done in.
Yep. One more hunt. It'll be with a muzzleloader in Indiana, and that'll be middle of the month, and a place we've never hunted. So it'll be an adventure, and it's those, like I said earlier, those first year trips, to new places. It's just really the intel that you learn, that's so valuable. I get it. A lot of people ask me about hunting out of state, hunting public ground, and I tell people, for the most part, don't expect to shoot a deer for the first 2 trips. If you do, you get lucky. So, because unless you have a month, like my one special instance, where you really get to learn a place, it takes you a couple times. When you're only there for 5 days, 10 days maybe, it takes you a long time to to figure it out, and a couple of years of of good intel from the tree and learning what the deer do and how they use that particular piece of ground and what the other hunters are doing. So if we don't kill the 3rd year, then you start getting a little disappointed and looking for somewhere else to go maybe. But that first year hunt is always just a learning lesson more than anything. So we're hoping it'll be a good one. Maybe we'll get lucky and shoot a buck, and I'm sure it'll be a place that we'll be back to next year and years after. So.
Well,
good luck, man.
Yeah, we wish you luck, and I'll be
Thank
hopefully.
You guys do with the rest of your seasons.
Thank you, Tyler. And real quick before we let you go, if people want to see more from the Antler Geeks or see your iPad magazine, all that kind of stuff, where can people go to see the Antler Geeks stuff?
Check us out on Facebook. Really, everything's there. Just search Antler Geeks. Like I said, we've got the web show on realtree.com, and always got a lot going on our YouTube channel. And then the publication is it's for iOS formats, and you can just search Antler Geeks in the newsstand, and it's pretty cool. Really interactive, and like I said, it's all focused on DIY whitetails. So.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I would agree with you, Tyler. You've got some really cool stuff going on, so I definitely would encourage all of our listeners to check out Antler Geeks. And Tyler, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a good chat, as always.
Yep, thank you, guys.
All right, have a good one, Tyler.
Yep, we'll talk to you. Bye.
All right, well, I think that's going to do it for us here today on the Wired to Hunt podcast. But before we go, Dan, I believe you had a little announcement you wanted to share with our listeners. Is that right?
That's right. All right, so, me and Mark have been pretty big believers in ozonics, and I actually talked with a guy from ozonics, and he sent me a couple units. Well, there's no need for me to have 2 of them, so what we're going to do here is we're going to do a little ozonics giveaway. So if you're listening to this podcast, and I know Mark's going to have a link on the show notes, and he's going to make a post on his Facebook page, where what you need to do is you need to go to the Nine Finger Chronicles. You need to like the page altogether. You need to like the post, the Ozonics giveaway post. And then what I'll do is I'll cross-reference those names to make sure that you're not only following and liking Wired to Hunt, but you're also following and liking the Nine Finger Chronicles. And there will be instructions on there as well, what you need to do. But what we're going to do is we're going to give away an Ozonics, and we're going to announce that name on next week's podcast. And there's a couple other little accessories that go along with it that they sent me. And this is like a $400 to $500 giveaway. So if you haven't used an Ozonics before, you need to sign up for this and potentially win it. Then you can use it, and then you can tell us how well they work next deer hunting season, or even later this deer season, depending on what state you hunted. And then I think the next week after that, we're going to have a giveaway for some products from Stick and Pick. company, and I know the owner of that very well, and he's all for giving away free product. And I think, Mark, you're going to have some free products from some of your sponsorship from Wired to Hunt. Yeah. And it's just a good way to get some free gear. So if you're a part of that giveaway, it's going to be not only, get some exposure to myself and Mark and whatnot, but we're going to give away some gear that, especially in Ozonics, man, they're not necessarily cheap, but we know they work. So sign up for it, like it, and we'll have more details on the show notes and on the Facebook page as well. So
yeah, I think it's a cool way that we can give back to all of you listeners as a little Christmas thank you present for making this such an awesome first year for the Wired Hunt podcast. And so, like Dan said, he's going to have a few more things coming in the next week or so. I'm also going to be giving away some free gear in the following weeks, and we're just going to keep the free stuff flowing up until Christmas. And so for those of you listening in the future, this podcast is going live on December 4th, 2014. So if you're listening this week of December 4th through the next 7 days, like you said, go to either wiredtohunt.com/episode 34, where there will be a link and instructions on this that will take you back to Dan's Facebook page, which is the Nine Finger Chronicles. So go there, you'll get all the details you need, and one of you will get an Ozonics, and like Dan said, you can try it out, and either you're going to see that it works like we've been saying it does, or you're going to email us and say we're idiots. But either way, give it a shot. Hope you enjoy it, and thank you, Dan, for donating that to one of our listeners.
Yeah, no problem. It's one of those things, man. It's one of those products that, we're not the type of people who brag about, we're not product driven. We're going to tell you how we really feel about something. And these guys sent me some free stuff, so I don't have any need for two of them. So I figure I'm going to give one away.
I think that's pretty awesome. Well, I think that will do it for us, though, Dan. For today, we've been John for a pretty good amount here. So, as I always like to say, with that said, as always, for all of you listening, if you've enjoyed this show, we really do appreciate you taking time to leave a rating or review on iTunes. I've been saying this every week for the past 6 months, and a lot of you have been taking me up on it and leaving reviews. I've gotten 117 ratings or reviews so far, which is incredible. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and it just makes such a big difference. So can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I also just want to say thank you to all of you that send emails and Facebook messages and notes on Twitter and everything. Yeah, it means the world, and it's so great to hear that this show is resonating with you and that you're enjoying it and that's helping you. It makes all the time and effort that we put into it so worthwhile. So thank you, and I'm just thrilled to hear that. As I mentioned earlier, be sure to visit wiredtohunt.com/episode 34 for all the information me and Dan just talked about with the giveaway, as well as links back to all the Antler Geeks content that Tyler talked about and anything else that we might have mentioned. So be sure to check that out. And finally, we'd like to thank our partners who help make this show possible. So big thanks to Sitka Gear, Trophy Ridge, Bear Archery, Redneck Blinds, Carbon Express Arrows, Huntsoft, Lacrosse Boots, Big & J Long Range Attractants, and the Whitetail Institute of North America. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us here today. Good luck in the weeks to come. Keep hunting hard, regardless of how cold it is, and stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. You simply pour a can into your gas tank, Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. So pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.